First of all, I appreciate you reaching out, and the BBC reached out. I mean, I had no plans of commenting except on.
He died surrounded by family, but not everyone was ready to say goodbye quietly. While the world mourned the loss of a heavy metal legend, two public figures erupted with rage, not at Ozzy Osbourne himself, but at the way his death was being presented. Within hours, raw emotions turned into an explosive backlash that no one saw coming. He wasn't even buried yet, and already the controversy had begun. In the hours following the announcement of Ozzy's passing, tributes poured in from every corner of the globe. Fans, fellow musicians, actors, politicians. But while many expressed grief, one voice cut through the mourning like a blade. Gene Simmons. The Kiss frontman, never one to hold back, didn't post a polished PR statement. Instead, he gave a raw, furious interview to a rock radio station in LA, where he tore into what he called the romanticized circus surrounding Ozzy's final days. He was a friend, Simmons said, voice trembling with emotion. But let's not rewrite history now that he's gone. This industry watched him destroy himself for decades. Everyone cashed in on the madness, and now they want to paint him like a tragic poet? Spare me. Gene's anger wasn't aimed at Ozzy. It was aimed at the world around him, the people who enabled the chaos, sold tickets to it, and now pretended to mourn it with reverence. Hours later, the controversy grew when Piers Morgan, TV host, provocateur, and longtime fan of Ozzy, used his platform to go even further. In a fiery monologue, he accused Ozzy's inner circle of protecting a sanitized myth rather than telling the truth. He didn't go peacefully, Morgan snapped. He went broken, and we deserve to know why. What followed was a media firestorm. Angry fans, shocked industry insiders, and divided reactions from Ozzy's family. Some praised Gene and Piers for their honesty. Others called it tasteless, even cruel. But one thing was clear. Their fury hit a nerve. It wasn't just about Ozzy's death. It was about the way we process celebrity mortality. And who gets to write the final chapter. The moment Gene Simmons' interview aired, it spread like wildfire. Rock forums, Reddit threads, and Twitter timelines exploded. Some fans were furious. How dare he attack Ozzy's legacy so soon after his death? Others applauded him for saying what many had quietly felt for years. But for Gene, it wasn't about disrespect. It was about honesty. "I loved the guy," he said in a follow-up statement posted to his social media. "But I also watched him suffer." The world laughed when he mumbled through interviews, stumbled on stage, or slurred his words on TV. We turned his pain into entertainment. Now we cry about it like we had nothing to do with it? It was harsh, but it was real. Gene's anger wasn't isolated. For years, insiders had whispered about how Ozzy's health had been downplayed. By management, by family, even by the man himself. Tour dates were scheduled when he could barely walk. Promotional appearances were edited to remove signs of cognitive decline. His fans saw a legend soldiering on, but behind the scenes, he was crumbling. Then came Piers Morgan's rant, a televised bombshell on his primetime show. "This isn't just about Ozzy," he began, gripping the edge of his desk. "This is about how celebrity families, media-trained, brand-aware, profit-focused, manage death like it's a marketing campaign." He accused Sharon Osbourne and the team around Ozzy of softening the truth to preserve the Osbourne brand. He even hinted at details we may never know about what really happened in the rock icon's final weeks. Reaction was instant and polarizing. Fans flooded the internet with opinions. Some defended Sharon fiercely. She protected him, loved him, and carried him through decades of hell. Others agreed with Piers. Why weren't we told how bad it was? Even within the rock community, the split was visible. While some artists stayed silent, A few spoke out. Slash tweeted a single word, respect. Duff McKagan added, let the man rest. But the conversation was bigger than tweets. It was about control. Who owns the story of a life after death? Behind the public outrage, something deeper was unraveling: grief, guilt, and the impossible pressure of legacy. For Sharon Osbourne, the criticism hit especially hard. She had spent the last years of her life caring for Ozzy around the clock, managing his treatments, protecting his privacy, and guarding what little dignity he had left. And now, with her husband barely in the ground, the world was accusing her of manipulation? Sources close to the family say Sharon was blindsided by the backlash. She knew people would talk, one insider shared, but she didn't expect this kind of anger. Not from people like Gene or Piers. Privately, she confided that Ozzy didn't want his suffering made public. He didn't want people to see him that way, she told friends. Not because he was ashamed, but because he didn't want pity. That line, "he didn't want pity," became a dividing point. To some, it was a sign of strength. To others, a way of masking the harsh truth. Had fans been given the real story? Or had they been sold the last act of a carefully controlled performance? Amid all this, a clip surfaced that shifted the mood entirely. It was an old interview from 2014, barely noticed at the time. Ozzy, sitting next to Sharon, was asked how he wanted to be remembered. He paused, then said, "I just don't want people to lie about me when I'm gone. Don't turn me into something I'm not. Just tell the truth. All of it." The quote hit like a lightning bolt, because suddenly everyone was asking, what was the truth? Was it the cleaned-up image, the quiet passing, the loving family, the peaceful goodbye? Or was it the rawer version, the pain, the regression, the final days of confusion and struggle? Gene and Piers had forced the public to confront a difficult question. In trying to honor Ozzy, had we accidentally betrayed him? In the days that followed, the divide only deepened. Tributes continued to pour in, but now they came with a sharper tone. Rock magazines published think pieces with titles like "The Tragedy Behind the Legend" and "Was Ozzy Osbourne Protected or Silenced?" Fans began revisiting old footage, analyzing clips for signs they may have missed. The vacant stares, the forced smiles, the long pauses between words. Meanwhile, Sharon remained largely silent. She didn't respond to Gene's interview or Piers' on-air tirade, but she didn't need to. Her silence became its own statement, one that only fueled speculation further. Was she grieving, or was she, as some accused, managing damage control? Then came a surprise, a joint statement from Jack and Kelly Osbourne, released via social media. "Our father wasn't perfect. He never claimed to be. He was loud, chaotic, and flawed, but also loving, brave, and deeply sensitive. What he went through in the final years of his life was painful. And yes, private. That's how he wanted it. To imply that we hid the truth to protect a brand is not only untrue, it's cruel. He didn't want pity. He wanted peace." The statement calmed some waters, but for others, it raised a new debate. Should public figures get to choose privacy when their legacy belongs to millions? That's what Gene and Piers were really questioning. Not Ozzy's worth, but the ownership of his story. They weren't saying he deserved less respect. In fact, they were saying the opposite, that he deserved more. More truth, more context, more honesty. Because a legacy built only on nostalgia and sanitized memories, they argued, isn't a legacy at all. It's a lie. But the danger of that argument? It assumes the public is entitled to everything, even the parts someone chooses to keep private. By the end of the week, the debate had evolved into something bigger than Ozzy himself. Talk shows, podcasts, and even university panels began using the controversy as a lens to examine a broader cultural issue: how we treat our icons in death. Why are we so obsessed with the real story? Why do we dig through hospital records, leaked text messages, and family statements searching for some hidden truth? As if the version we're given isn't enough? Some said it was about accountability. We need to stop idolizing brokenness, one commentator argued. Ozzy's pain was turned into a punchline for years. Now everyone wants to cry over him like they didn't laugh when it suited them. Others saw it differently. Sometimes people just want closure, said a grief counselor on a BBC panel. Fans feel like they knew Ozzy, so when they're handed a neat, quiet ending, it feels dishonest. It doesn't match the messiness of who he was. And then, finally, Sharon broke her silence. Appearing on a pre-scheduled segment of the Talk UK, she addressed the backlash with unexpected calm. "I'm not here to defend myself. I'm here to honor my husband. He lived in front of the world for 50 years. Can I not protect his last few months? He was tired. He was in pain. He asked me to keep things quiet, and I did." She paused, clearly emotional. If that makes me a villain, so be it. It was the closest she'd come to addressing Jean or Piers directly. And though she never named them, the message was clear. This wasn't about PR, it was about love, and about honoring the wishes of a dying man who had already given too much of himself to the world. Some called her statement brave, others called it calculated, but no one could deny the emotional weight of it. For the first time since Ozzy's passing, the noise began to quiet. As the media cycle slowly began to shift, a strange kind of silence settled over the story. Not from lack of interest, but from exhaustion. People had said what they needed to say. Gene Simmons stopped giving interviews. Piers Morgan moved on to another outrage. And fans, those who had cried, argued, and posted endlessly, began doing what they always had, listening to Ozzy's music. But something had changed. His lyrics hit differently now. "I'm just a dreamer. I dream my life away. I'm going through changes. Goodbye to romance." These weren't just songs anymore. They were confessions, warnings, farewells. And in that shift, the public's perception of the man behind the myth began to evolve. Not because of a press release, not because of a tribute, but because of the thing Ozzy had always used to tell the truth: his voice.
Not pretending to be, I reluctantly admit that sometimes I'm full of myself. I'm aware of that. I watch myself in videos and I'm thinking, who does this guy think he is? Yes, guilty as charged. Ozzy, never.
The conversations sparked by Jean and Piers weren't entirely in vain. In some ways, they succeeded in pushing people to look deeper, past the headlines and the jokes, into the vulnerable, flawed human being who had stood at the center of a storm for 5 decades. And in doing so, they helped people understand just how much Ozzy had endured, and how much of that pain he had hidden, not to deceive, but to protect. By the second week, even critics of Sharon began to soften their stance. A viral tweet put it simply: maybe Ozzy didn't want us to see him like that. Maybe letting him go with some dignity was the kindest thing anyone could have done. There was something powerful in that sentiment, something final. Because maybe the truth isn't always what's raw and exposed. Maybe sometimes the truth is in what's left unsaid. In the end, all the outrage, the opinion pieces, the social media feuds, they faded into the background, leaving behind a single undeniable truth. Ozzy Osbourne mattered, not just because he was famous, or wild, or groundbreaking, but because he was one of the few public figures who let us see the whole arc, from the reckless beginnings to the crumbling end. He let us witness it all, and whether we were laughing with him, crying for him, or questioning the people around him, one thing remained constant: he was real. Gene Simmons, in a later interview, softened his tone. "I wasn't angry at Sharon," he clarified. "I was angry at myself, at the industry, at how we all stood by and watched the decline like it was just another season of television. Ozzy deserved better. We all should have done better." Even Piers Morgan, weeks later, admitted the timing of his remarks may have been harsh. But the conversation it sparked, he added, it needed to happen. And maybe he was right. Because beneath all the noise, this wasn't just a story about one man. It was a story about all of us. About how we treat our heroes. About how we grieve. And about the uncomfortable truth that sometimes the legend we celebrate was also someone's husband, father, or friend. Someone who suffered. Someone who loved. Someone who tried. That's the legacy Ozzy Osbourne left behind. Messy, complicated, beautiful, and not even the loudest controversy can drown that out. In the end, Ozzy's voice lives on, not just in songs or videos, but in the memories, the arguments, and the raw emotional imprint he left behind. What do you think? Were Gene Simmons and Piers Morgan right to speak out? Or did they cross a line? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more in-depth stories behind the headlines, hit that subscribe button. Because the truth is rarely simple, but always worth hearing.